Hi there, this is Joshua, and I wanted to give a brief walkthrough of the Agent Service Toolkit template repo that I recently published on GitHub to give you some information about it. So this is a toolkit that makes it very easy for you to build and run and serve your own AI agents using LangGraph with a FastAPI server and client and a Streamlit app interface. So I was trying to build some LangGraph agents myself and looking at some of the best agent frameworks that are available today, and found that some of the hosting and serving was a little bit of a challenge, and there was more scaffolding that I needed to get started. So I decided to build a template that I'm planning to use for some of my future projects and share it so that I can spend more time focusing on the kind of core logic and the agent capabilities and less on the serving and stuff around it. So what did I end up with? So here's a little architecture diagram. Basically, we have a LangGraph agent, which is running inside of a FastAPI service, all built in Python, that exposes both a streaming and a synchronous invoke endpoint to get responses to queries or other input to the agent, a client for interacting with that really easily in Python, and then a Streamlit app for serving results, which I'll demo here in a minute. And yeah, I found that this really helped so that I can really just kind of focus on this piece and not need to worry so much about the rest for development going forward. First, I wanted to take a moment just to talk about why I chose LangGraph for this template. So I'm really interested in this idea of kind of more complex cognitive architectures and compound AI systems. This paper in particular from some folks at Berkeley about the benefit of compound AI systems I found to be really compelling. And TLDR, I think we'll continue to see gradual improvements in the capabilities of raw LLMs, but I think a lot more of the value and kind of advancements that we'll see in actual kind of practical use cases and applied use cases with LLMs will come from these compound AI systems and having cognitive architectures that have more explicit control flow, and kind of classic engineering techniques. Um, so I spent some time kind of surveying and figuring out what were some of the best frameworks that were available right now, and there are a number of them. Also wanted to give some shout outs to Llama Index Workflows, which launched actually just last week. DSPy, which I think is a really interesting optimizer and takes sort of a different approach. And I know there's a number of others. Prefect Control Flow, another one that I came across. But it really seemed to me that at least today in August 2024, that LangGraph is sort of the most advanced and had the most capabilities that I was interested in sort of out of the box. I've built a decent amount with LangChain over the past year and change, and I've definitely run into some of the pain points that are often cited with LangChain. But I did find, yeah, I generally had a better experience building with LangGraph, and also it seemed like LangChain has kind of continued to smooth out some of the issues that they've encountered. So overall, I'm pretty happy with that choice. What are some of the other features of this? So besides the agent and the service that I mentioned, um, I'll demonstrate some of the streaming capabilities that I built into this that allows both kind of token streaming and interaction with tools to be rendered to the user in that Streamlit interface. Everything is built async first, particularly on the service side. So this service is very efficient for handling concurrent requests. Um, I started building a content moderation feature, although I had some issues getting a good inference serving for LlamaGuard. Um, but I'll talk about that briefly. It's built in feedback, human feedback to Langsmith using ST feedback and Streamlit, and everything is able to run on Docker, which makes development and deployment a lot easier. Okay, let's do a quick demo. So here is my app, the Streamlit app, which has that client powering it. Currently, this is hosted on Streamlit Cloud, and it's backed by the FastAPI service, which is running on Azure App Service. So you can see some of the controls here. I'm running GPT-4o Mini to start with. It also has the ability to run on Llama 3.1, running on Grok, and I've got the streaming enabled. Okay, so let's try a little example here. So how many times do I need to stop and charge when driving from Oakland to Pittsburgh in a base Tesla Model 3? I've had decent luck with this. So this agent has a web search tool built in, so it's able to look up information online. It's doing a few searches here. Okay, and it's doing some calculations. All right, I decided to just YOLO it and not actually use the calculator, but yeah, it's doing some searches. Math by 263. Great. So you can see the calculator tool in use here as well. As you can tell, I haven't spent so much time optimizing the agent yet, so we'll spend more time there. But yeah, this is a nice interface for rendering, and you can see sort of the intermediate steps happening here. And that is the live demo. Okay, so let's walk through, I'll walk through a couple of the features in the code as well. So I've got my repo open here, and you can see I'm actually using the Cursor IDE, which is built on VS Studio and has a nice coding assistant built in, which I found to work quite well. So I can ask questions of Claude and had a lot of fun building this repo out with Cursor. So the key thing that I mentioned is the server, the service. So yeah, I've got a FastAPI app. I've got basic auth built in. I am using a token streaming handler to get the LLM tokens from the agent as they're generated in order to stream those. And I've got basically the invoke endpoint, which takes the graph and just runs it and returns kind of the final result. And then I also have the the streaming method that will actually basically I'm using a async queue to pass both the tokens and kind of final messages through to the client and stream those using SSE. So you can see that, and then also have wrapped the feedback mechanism on the service so that I don't have to have any of the Langsmith and LangChain keys on the client. So the client doesn't need any configuration or to have any of the secrets available. And then, yeah, I've wrapped that in a nice client. So I've got this agent client that, again, kind of has simplified methods to call those invoke and stream functions on the service. And so what that lets you do is write pretty straightforward Python code to call it. So here's a little example script that's just running some basic prompts on the client against a running service. So you can see I can just initialize the client with the URL, and then I can both do async invoke or streaming, and then parse and handle the results. So yeah, that's the service and the client. The Streamlit app is a little bit more complex just in terms of handling some of the, I think particularly, so got all the configuration, some of the standard kind of tracking messages and session state, and then this draw messages function really kind of has some of the core logic for handling the tools and the token streaming, and kind of rendering that in a nice way and keeping it consistent. Yeah, not too much to call out here. Oh, I did build the Streamlit app also using async. I've heard a lot of feedback and also, spent some time myself in the past trying to build Streamlit stuff with async and had trouble with it. So I wanted to see what was possible. And I did find that if you wrap the entire app in async functions and then use a main function to call it with asyncio.run, it's been running pretty well for me. I won't claim to kind of understand the deep architectural interior of Streamlit to understand, if this is actually that much better than running it as a sync app. But yeah, that's what I found. And then finally, maybe some of the most interesting stuff is in the agent. And so here's where I'm, using most of the LangChain and LangGraph. I tried to abstract that out, particularly from the client, as much as possible, and can have some instructions and model calls, Um, I'll talk a little bit about the LlamaGuard, but yeah, build that agent out using LangGraph for the service to interact with. Um, yeah, those are some of the main things. This is also compatible with LangGraph Studio. So this is something that the LangChain team just launched, I think last week as well, that lets you kind of visually interact with your model and see the flows and things like that. So I can ask again, does ask it to do some math and submit and see it running through the nodes and getting the results. So this is quite handy. It's yeah, definitely still got some rough edges, but I think will be really useful for continuing to iterate on my agents. And I was able to get this running with the existing setup in a fairly straightforward way. Um, and then yeah, last I'll just talk briefly about the LlamaGuard and some of the content moderation. So it did build out kind of a nice little output class and some functions for being able to basically input a conversation, um, invoke invoke the LlamaGuard model with the prompt, and parse the output back out into a nicely structured form. And so, yeah, the main issue that I had with this was I tried using both Grok and Replicate versions of LlamaGuard and found that I wasn't able to get good inference time on either of those services for that particular model. So that's why this isn't totally integrated now. But yeah, if anyone knows of a good hosted LlamaGuard inference endpoint, please leave a comment or an issue or something like that, because I would love to spend more time building this out. And yeah, then maybe the last thing that I'll just show is the Docker setup. So I have a compose.yaml for being able to do Docker compose and Docker images for both the app and the service running separately. And so with that, I'm able to do um, basically just run Docker compose watch, um, and it will stand up the two images and serve them on localhost so that I can also go to localhost and have the app here and say, what can you help with? And get a response. And then this also has the nice hot reloading support. So that means if I make a change in the app, this is a really awesome app, and save it, then it automatically regenerates the app, restarts the container, and the same thing basically happens on the service, which is really convenient. Um, so yeah, that is kind of a walkthrough of the app, some of the features, and the main code. If you want to build and use this yourself, you can just clone down the repository. It's also got the template button here, so it's easy to create your own copy. And then set up a few environment variables. Really, the OpenAI key is the only thing that you absolutely need. Um, and then you can run it with Docker. Also has instructions to run it in Python virtual environments and some scripts to make that quite easy. And oh, I didn't talk about tests. So I did build a few tests on the service. We'll plan to add more. But yeah, that's a capability too. And then, yeah, basically you should be able to just modify stuff in the agent directory to build your own agent and not need to mess with too much else, which should be great. Would love to get contributions, have a few ideas for the roadmap here of things that I'd like to improve, but that's what we've got today. So thanks so much. Hope you enjoy and find this useful. And please leave feedback and comments so that we can work on it together. Thanks.